And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Sports. And what a week we have ahead of us, really. It's going to be, come on, green light going on. It's going to be an absolute cracker. You know, we are talking about a grudge match that is 2 years in the making, and so many different aspects to it already. And now, with some injuries and potential mind games, it's only adding to the hype. And I think that the Springboks are going to expect a very, very hostile environment on Saturday, and I'm absolutely here for it. I love it when we have these kind of narratives. You know, I always say that the biggest problem in rugby is a lack of narratives, and we sometimes get so bogged down in the rugby values and the gentlemen off the pitch, and there's and even all the pushing and shoving. Afterwards everybody has a beer and gets together, and that's great, and that's all very nice. But I love narratives, and I love grudge matches, and a sense that this is personal. That this is not just an ordinary test, for example. And what I want to talk about today is, given the fact that it is a very different side that we've played to most of them so far this weekend, given the fact that it is potentially different conditions, although the conditions are looking a bit better. It doesn't look like it's going to be raining on Saturday, which is very, very positive, because that's the big thing, is that if it rains, then it becomes a bit more difficult to play the kind of Tonyball concept that we want to. And what I'm talking about is, given the physicality of France, given the size that they pack, for example, given the aerial threat not the aerial threat, but the kicking game that they play, for example, will we see Tonyball this weekend? And what does that look like? I think we're going to see aspects. And I think, in terms of the team selection, and tomorrow we'll kind of do more of a bit of a look ahead at the team selection itself, the team only being named on Thursday afternoon, which, by the way, will be after the French team announcement, which means that if there's any sort of opportunity for us to change, and that was kind of the plan, there's still opportunity for that. We could potentially tweak our side based on what France name on Thursday, because our team announcement is going to be after this. So the big question is what game plan do the Boks play? It's going to be our poll. Tonyball, or I'm trying to think, we haven't have a thing, or we're going to say, what do we want to call it? Almost traditional ball. I want to go with traditional ball, or just say all out attack, or solid set piece orientated plan. So basically, take fewer risks, for example. Do we, for example, go with the Sash Farming Commons to do Money Buck off the bench? Are we going to see Andre Pollard come in? Are we talking about kicking penalties, for example, trying to grind out set piece penalties, taking the 3 points, building innings? Or are we going to look at having a go, trying to create line breaks, creating those passes, creating that space, scoring tries, and the likes of that? So in terms of the comments, Craig Ward says, oh my God, that guy that has to face that 145 kg prop, France prop, no ox, RIP. Bok gonna win 1 point either way. Could you imagine if we do win by 1 point? Goodness me. And Hugo saying, what does he mean by risk Tonyballs? I'm saying, because we have been at times very defensively vulnerable, because sometimes we have played that bit of an all-out attack, or taking the space, or attacking the space and throwing that sort of half pass at the expense of potentially conceding. That's what I mean. And if things aren't working, do we continue to try and play this expansive brand of rugby where we are still very kicking orientated? That's the ironic thing. We actually don't kick a lot less than what we did a year or two ago. However, what we do now is it's when we kick, and on that winning that ball back, for example, the way we then sort of look to attack, because we still very much have the aerial threat. We still have a big part of that as our game, kicking high and having Ethan Hooker, for example, compete for the ball, even Etsebeth compete for the ball, because when you get that ball back, you're now suddenly attacking a defense which is moving backwards. And I went on a bit of a tangent, but we discussed it quite a lot in terms of how difficult it is to defend when you're moving backwards. And that is why things like dominant tackles, for example, even when you're defending, makes such a big difference, because when a team's moving backwards, it's difficult to move forward. It sounds pretty straightforward, obviously, but obviously that is a key part of rugby. It's how do you move forward? And often, for example, people, teams will go to the boot or the likes of that when they're not moving forward, when they feel like they're stagnating and they're not moving forward. And that's, for example, what Ireland was always so good at, is the fact, because they had this multifaceted, multi-channel type of a game plan, they would then allow for more line breaks, and they kind of continue to move forward quite often. But as soon as they didn't, that's where, for example, Dabs Gibson Park would go to the boot. Now, the Boks generally would go to the box kick far earlier. They didn't necessarily have, and they would almost kind of wait for it to break down a little bit, and then all of a sudden, when it's on, say, right, now we can have a bit of a go. But a lot of it was lots of line breaks, for example, lots of getting over the advantage line with big carries, sucking in defenses, and then kind of going after. Whereas like an Iron, for example, they love the inside balls, they love quick hands as well, to try and create the gaps inside and outside. And it's a very different way of doing things, but it can all be as effective as each other. So Kajo says, we need to raise Tonyball, no question. Alyssa says, do you think Ngoma Zulu will start? Craig says, no, full DNA Bok rugby on display if it rains, brother. Well, that's what I'm saying. At this stage, hopefully, touch wood, and you hope at this stage it looks like it's going to be dry. And if it's dry, then obviously we can kind of almost choose to play. We can go with your Tonyball and you kind of all-out attack and the likes of that. You can have Tonyball coming on and having a go. And I mean, it's interesting. You go back and look at that semi-final, and one of the big things we remember is the goal-kicking issues that Tonyball had. But we also remember some of the tries we scored, and it was a very interesting game, because it wasn't like the final where it was, an arm wrestle and it was such a low scoring game. It wasn't. There were tries scored by both teams. I mean, Cyril Bayer went over in the second minute. It was the worst possible start, and you kind of have to come back from it. So the conditions will allow, I think, running rugby to a certain degree, and allow us to be able to play that. I still think we will be going into an aerial threat, and that in that regard, I'm very interested to see if we're going to see potentially Ethan Hooker, or whether they're backing Cheslin Colby and Kurt Lawrence to be enough of an aerial threat. The big thing for us is our set piece. Now, having lost Oxen Share, that might suddenly, wouldn't say nullify a set piece, but that's a big blow. If Oxen Share plays with Thomas Toy, I'm feeling pretty confident that we can hold our own at scrums and potentially dominate them. Obviously, it's a very good French scrum, and it's a very good French front row, and this will be our Everest really, I think, of a scrum to try and conquer. We've shown last year that we can still out scrum Ireland, for example. Without Oxen Chair, it becomes difficult. It becomes far more difficult. And you're going to have to see if a Bowen Fenter, for example, or a Gerard Stennekamp, or even Thomas Toy at Lucid can fill that void that we've now lost with no Oxen Chair. Because it's going to be a very big void to fill. And hopefully they can, but that is going to be a potential big dampener on the way we want to play, because he gives you that scrum dominance. He's the best loose head in the world. I don't have any issues with that. I think he is the best loose head in the world. And, him losing out is going to be a big blow for us at the end of the day. So in terms of, do I think Sasham Ngoma Zulu is going to start? I think he has to start. I think he's playing in such a way that you just can't leave him out. He's affecting the game. He's kicking well. For Poles, for example, he's creating tries. And some people are sitting there saying, oh, he's a bit selfish. You can't argue the results. I think that's the one thing. Maybe his first instinct isn't always to look at, is this baseball wild for the pass, for example. Maybe his first instinct is to look at, the gaps that he can potentially take. But at the end of the day, the kid scored like 6 or 7 tries in the last few games. Scored a hat-trick against Argentina, scored 2 last weekend. It becomes a difficult person to sit there and say, no, what you're doing is not right, because it's just the way he's playing. He's untouchable, and you don't bottle that kind of confidence, and you don't try and change it. You say, right, we back you. Go and get that done. Go and get the job done, because we're backing you to be able to get these results. We're backing you to be able to do it against the best teams in the world. We backed you against New Zealand, and you came good, and we're going to back you against France to see if you can come good. So I think he has to start. I really do think he has to start. My big question is, are we brave enough to leave Handré Pollard out on Thursday when we announce our team? that for me will really show how much we've progressed as a team. Not progressed. I'm not trying to say leaving him out as progression, but he's always been that sort of in case of emergency smash glass, come on, kick the points, for example, and doesn't really suit the way we're trying to play. I think he'll get a lot better with Tony Brown working with him with regards to that. But we all know that, especially the way that Tony wants to play and kind of the multifaceted attack and maybe able to bring in our wings and the centre and the likes of that, if Caden Moody's playing, Marlon Liebach is the best at doing that. Are we prepared to go into Saturday without Honjay Pollard? Without that in case emergency smash glass situation? And say, you know what, we actually... And I think that the performance we saw from Marlon Liebach against New Zealand in that second half was phenomenal. I think that the way he came on and made good decisions, brought other players in and around him. I thought he actually tackled quite well. He's just such an all-around composed game that we kind of sat there saying, there it is. There is the Marlon Liebach we've been waiting for. There is the player that we know can be one of the best in the world, and we can comfortably back him to do a job and know that he's going to perform and he's going to get the job done. You know, we saw parts of that at the World Cup, but we saw the best and the worst of Marlon Liebach at the 2023 World Cup. I mean, he started with a man-of-the-match performance against Scotland with that no-look cross kick, and it was disgusting. Some of the stuff he did was incredible, but obviously he had the goal-kicking issues. He is kicking, touch wood, a lot better off the tee at the moment. So hopefully there has been a slight maybe technique change or if it's a mental thing. He is kicking with confidence at the moment. So if there was ever a time to back him against teams like France or like an Ireland, I think it's now. I genuinely do think it's now. And I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what we're going to try and do. Jean-Andre says we should just use our spies that are with the French side and decide then which style to play. PK says Tonyball / set piece mix, same formula that we had versus New Zealand. Yassine says outfield the same team who broke records against the All Blacks. Well, it's tempted, isn't it? I mean, why wouldn't you, really? There are obviously a couple of injuries that might limit exactly the same team, but this is the thing, you know, selections like Andre Esterhuizen, you know, Caden Moody, Damien Delende, Jesse Creel, you know, Damien Willems obviously back in the mix, going to fullback. You know, how do you bring him in, for example? So I think for me, I see Damien Willems for starting. I think there are two big calls in the back line, and that is the outside centre call, and I think it's the wings call. Now, I don't think it's that difficult of a call from the wings. I think you can't lose with your wing selection. You know, I think if you go Curtly Arons and Jason Colby, everyone goes, those are our two best wings. Phenomenal. Fantastic. If you go Ethan Hooker and Curtly Arons, you're sitting there going, how do you leave Ches and Colby out? But at the same time, well, look at Ethan Hooker. You know, he's doing such a job that maybe that's a chat. You know, you could leave Curtly Arons out, who's just come back, for the Boks. But look at a strike. He just scores tries for fun. You know, he was the official man of the match last weekend. How do you not bring him in? So again, I don't think there's a wrong decision to make between those three wings at the moment. Even if they went to Edel van der Merwe, I'd probably sit there saying, you know what, back it. I actually back it. I don't think we will see Edel van der Merwe this weekend. I think we'll see him next weekend against Italy. But I do think that there is no wrong option with our four wings at the moment. I think that they are so close to each other, and they all offer something slightly different. I think that you look at Ethan Hooker, he's got the pace, not necessarily the footwork, but he's got the pace, got the physicality, his aerial ability is tremendous. You know, I think Edel van der Merwe is someone who's really, really, he's a bit like Ches and Colby. I always think that Edel van der Merwe is a bit of a mix of Curtly Arons and Ches and Colby. I'd love to see who's quickest, but he's very deceptively physical for the size that he is. And he's a bit bigger than Cheslin. But I mean, I've seen Edel van der Merwe sit down props, like quite often. He's a very physical winger. You know, he puts the scrum cap on, everybody kind of assumes he's got an amazing step, and he does, but he's quite a physical player. Even defensively, he's a very strong player, very good defender. So they've all kind of got their slight difference with intricacies, but I don't think there's a lot between them. I think the big decision on Saturday is Jesse Creel or Caden Moody. And I don't actually know what the answer is. You know, your safe bet is Jesse Creel. You know what you're going to get from him. You know, he is reliable. He is a phenomenal defender, one of the best in the world. Good turn of pace, very high work rate, very good at breakdown, for example, and supporting Damien Delende. Good connection there as well. Again, that high work rate is very important. You've then also got Kaden Moody, who's played phenomenally well at outside centre this year for the Boks. Bit of a different type of player, a very balanced runner, has kind of got that finishing ability, getting much better from a defensive point of view. I think he's had to really embrace that defensive point of view, but definitely not as good a defender as Jesse Kriel is right now. He'll get there, I think, and I think it's a work in progress, but he also seems to just agree with the way we want to play. The way we want to play just seems to get him into the game a lot more. And I don't know if it's a preference way or just, the combination point of view, but he just seems to really suit Tonyball and the way we kind of try to play and his job in it. I think he's very good at it. So I don't think, and again, you're talking about such a nice situation where you're choosing one of our best outside centers ever, in Jesse Kriel, or else, the young prodigy who's never really had a bad game for the Boks at 13. And by having that extra pace, for example, that ability in the air, obviously as a wing, a very different type of player, but it's also slightly unknown. The French wouldn't have known a lot about Kaden Moody. I don't think he's ever played against France. So it is an interesting decision to make. Mr. Monkey has resurfaced. He had to go and wait for New Zealand to actually beat a top 5 side, and then he says, "You guys are going to get manhandled against the French." You guys probably played one of the worst test matches I've ever seen on Saturday as a collective. Those two teams, it was awful. So I'll just be keeping very quiet, taking my victory and keeping very quiet about it. Jean says, "I'd really like to see Edville against the French. Thoughts? I wouldn't mind it. I would not mind it. I think Edville van der Merwe, as I've mentioned, I think he's good enough. I really do." Ricky says, "I think it'll be Reinach, Sasha, Kurt Lawrence, Damon Delendi, Moody, Colby, Willems, the effort. He is supposedly fit. So let's hope he is. But they said that he should be ready for France. And obviously, if he's ready, you release him. Maybe we just go absolutely balls to the walls. Damien Willems at 12, Kaden Moody at 13, Cheslin Colby at 15, or maybe even, how's this balls to the walls? Sasha at 15, Marnie at 10, Damien Willems at 12, Kaden Moody 13, Kirkley, Arns, Cheslin Colby, your 2 wings, and just let the boys cook. Let them cook. Defensively, we might consider a try or two, just from a disconnect point of view. But offensively, look at those options. Christian says, "I think against France, we play a high tempo. I figure we play similar to the way we played to beat New Zealand. Lots of high ball, tie the forwards, but the game open in the last 20. Well, that's the big thing. To beat France, you have to find ways of moving the pack, which is why the Damien Willems, the famous scrum thing, became a thing, because they basically, what a shot that is. Tony DeZorzi. If you're not watching, the pros are busy playing against Pakistan. Tony DeZorzi just launched the ball back over his head. That's why we did the scrum, because they said they want to get those big forwards moving and to try and to try and get to tire out that front row and then have a go at them. So I think it's a very good shout in terms of being able to having to move those forwards, get them to try and wear them down a bit. But the problem is you obviously also have to be able to match them physically. You can't just name a smaller, less physical pack and then you get dominated at scrum time, for example, in the collisions. Now, I don't think if you name Jasper Wiese, Thomas du Toit, Eben Etzebeth, Malcolm Marx, Peter Steph du Toit in your pack, you should never be really getting dominated physically. And, for example, I'm so confident in so many of our players that if you were to name Eben Etzebeth and Franco Moston on Thursday, I'd be as happy as if you named Eben and Ruan Nokia, as happy as if you named Achia and Lud. I think Eben obviously has to play. It should be number 4, but everybody else just keeps stepping up when they need to, like Franco Mostert last week. That I just don't think I think it'd be very difficult to pick a bad team on Thursday with where we are, which is what's so exciting about at the moment. So Christian says, "I think Moody starts. He's an asset under the high ball." Yassine says, "In terms of backdown, I'd like to see to start Grant, Liebach, Devin Delende, Moody, Kurt Lawrence, Colby, Willems to start, Esterhazen and Williams off the bench." You've got Grant to start and then Williams with the bench. So probably Kubas then has to be one of them. Malabonga says, "Not all out attack like we did at Ellis Park, but a balance 70-30. And Yassine says, "DuPont and Jalabert are out, so that's great news for us at least." Yeah, I would have liked to have seen Anton DuPont. I would have really liked to have seen him play. I want to play. If I beat France, I want to beat the best French side. Not a weakened French side when then the excuses come saying, "Oh, but we didn't have Anton DuPont." Well, we don't have lots of players as well. We don't have Oxenchair. Who for me should be in the World Player of the Year nominations once again. And it's a criminal that he hasn't even featured, really. One of the most consistent performers in the last 3-4 years in World Rugby. Not just for the Boks, in World Rugby. And I just don't think it's been a prop that's been anywhere near that level of consistency as good old Retsegavaditswe. Ricky says, Lurt or Nokia? Again, if we're going to try and move the pack, then you think Ruan Nokia. But from a physicality point of view, it's hard. You'd be hard-pressed not to pick Lurt. And I think Lurt has also shown that he is a bit fitter. So he's definitely got more physicality, I think, right now than a Ruan Nokia does. He's slightly less lightweight. Ruan Nokia obviously gives you the skill set as well, the work rate. We saw him with the midfield lines and the likes of that. So it's a difficult decision to make. I don't really know what I'm going to put in my team, actually, to be honest, when I choose mine tomorrow. By the way, if you haven't already, then go get onto my Pickstot app and go and choose or go and predict your team for Thursday. We've got plenty of time to do it. I know that there have been predictions coming in throughout the last couple of days. And we're actually closing on 1,000 predictions on the platform, which is really, really good to see. We're over 300 users. And so if you guys have not, right now, go and sign up for my Pickstot app. Go and get your team prediction in. Because I know that, for example, yesterday, there have been well over 30-odd team predictions coming in for this weekend already. Yesterday, there were quite a few. So get your team predictions in on the app. And I know Christian sent me his. So have a look at some of the ones that have been sent in tomorrow. So yeah, go and get your predictions in and send them to me. Send them to YouTube at foreversportsmedia.com. And we'll feature some of them tomorrow when we go through them and have a look at exactly what everyone's predicting. And I think Christian's one was a pretty good one. In fairness. Oh no, one of our members says, even ruin my view. Speaking of our members, please, we need to try and get our members up for the year. We had a reasonable, successful Saturday with regards to building our memberships, but we need to try and get our 1.6 per day. So please do consider becoming a member. It is a very nominal fee. Monthly, but it makes a big difference. Our members do help us do a lot of things like paying for correspondence over there. So, for example, we had somebody yesterday at the press conference with Felix Jones. It's not free to get these correspondence over there. So yeah, big shout out to everybody who is a part of our members club and helping us to and then that's the thing, you see the direct results of it. Without that kind of support, we wouldn't have a correspondent over there. So you wouldn't be able to see the press conferences and the likes of that. So that's where we need your assistance. Those small things, they really do mount up. So a big shout out for everyone who did become a member over the weekend. We're well over 200 members now. We're trying to get to 300 members. That's our sort of plan by the end of the year. So we needed to potentially get about 1.6 to 2 members per day. And then we'll get to our 300 by the end of the year. And down the line, I'd love to get 1,000 members, and then we might even be able to actually go to France ourselves and get you some real on-the-ground coverage like we were doing for the World Cup. And we've got the World Cup in a couple of years' time to try and get to as well. As Jean-André says, 61 watching, 7 likes. Come on, peeps, show some love. Agreed. Malabonga says, tough call, but I think Lurt's slightly the better option. So essentially, it's quite split there. Quite a couple of people saying, well, let's actually maybe do that as a poll, shall we? And Kid Cynical with a massive, massive point saying, CR100, lest we forget, I'll have a clippies on the skipper. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is all. I mean, how's that for an occasion as well? Sia Khaleesi playing his 100th game for the Springboks on Saturday. Yeah, we're going to have brownies for the boys. It's not about what we want, it's about what has to happen, isn't it? And yeah, it's going to have to be one of those things. Ricky Lowe says, it is a tough one. Lurt plays so well at the moment, but the Nokia story is crazy. A few years ago, he barely got into the Bulls team, but he used all his opportunity to improve himself game by game. Yeah, I think he has been the most improved player in the last year or two. I think last year, he was one of the few players who grabbed his opportunity and said, I'm not going anywhere. I think him and Al Lowe, probably my top two sort of newer players who kind of took their chances. So, yeah, I think honestly, as far as things we're going to bring the front game, well, that's what I think is quite interesting is the fact I think we need to have a look at what France are going to do potentially and maybe change things as depending on what the chat is. Because with going with the big pack and obviously matching them physically, that can work. obviously sort of tends to mean we might not be as creative. We might not get through the line breaks and the likes of that, which was been one of our big assets this year. You can also go with a slightly smaller pack and try and move them around. But I think there's lots of different ways of doing it. To try and climb into the mind of Rassie Erasmus is quite a difficult thing to do, despite how many people do try and do it quite often. And that's where my picks comes in, to try and get your team predictions in. So I personally think that even the Lucid decision, I think, is a very, very interesting one. The fact that we brought in Asenate and Tlabakanya in, an out-and-out tight head, to replace an out-and-out Lucid, means that I think that Thomas Satoy has a big chance of being a loose head this weekend. I think you could very, very well see, Thomas Satoy even starting at loose head, with maybe Volkolo, tight head, Malcolm Marks, and off the bench you could see Asenate coming on with Gerard Steenekamp and Johan Gabela. I think we could very well see. I think we would have seen Andrew Vessels if he was fit. Maybe we completely go AWOL and go and back Zach Porthen again. I don't think we will, but that could be an option. Alternatively, you're going to have to back Bowen Fenter. And I think if you do back Bowen Fenter, you'll start. My guts is I think Gerard Steenekamp will continue to be used as a bench option. He's always kind of been in that impact squad player. And it wouldn't surprise me if that's the same on the weekend, whether it's then Bowen Fenter to start or whether it's Thomas Satoy to start Lucid. And so, yeah, it's an interesting one. Christian says, surely the team will run themselves to death for Sion's 100th. Don't think physicality will be a problem. Well, yeah, I mean, if there was ever someone to get up for with the 100th test, Sia Khaleesi and everything he's been through, and Captain Fantastic and the likes of that, has got to be, one of the most iconic players to get to 100 tests for the Boks. I just think it's going to be such a good occasion. And Stade de France, what an arena it is, by the way. One of the coolest places I've ever watched rugby. Phenomenal stadium. Melabonga says, Kirtley ever come off the bench before? I think Hooker is nailed on to start. I don't think Kirtley actually has ever come off the bench. We very rarely have wings on the bench, if ever. Centre, fly half, that's usually our go-to. Or fullback if it's Philly LaRue. Honestly, says, my pick on the favorite app, Vilko, Marks, and Detoy. Yeah, I don't think it's a bad pick, to be perfectly honest. I think that's, I don't know if it's a safe pick, but it's a decent pick. Casual says, there's 50 people watching, guys. Remember to like the stream. Everyone except Mr. Monkey to like it. Yeah, poor guy. Intel says, I'm in France, now big French supporter. The country is afraid of you. Well, that's what I love to hear. I just got I had a lot of grumpy French supporters when I was over there and we beat them. And probably a good time to leave because I'm not sure how very welcome I was afterwards after that quarterfinal loss. But the French are just phenomenally passionate. It was the amount of times the national anthem gets sung in a game is wild. Very passionate supporters, very, very passionate, and were very upset when they lost out to us. So they would have been targeting this game all year. And Felix Jones in his press conference yesterday very much said that it was not a grudge match, and they're not looking at it like that as anything more special than the others. But I can tell you right now, France are. They've got a score to settle. Even if they say they're not, there's a score to settle. There is. At the end of the day, we went to their home World Cup and we dumped them out of it, and that was not taken lightly. So, yeah, it's gonna be an interesting game, and I'm just so looking forward to. Because I just think that it's going to be a really, really cool day of rugby. And a little bit late game, starts at 10 o'clock, so we're going to have to pace ourselves. I've actually got a 30th in the afternoon, so I'll be pacing myself. So hopefully you guys all make sure you get your water and your beverages all sort of make. Actually, I would suggest having a bit of a drinking plan. Throw in a couple of sugar drinks in there to keep you going and the likes of that. Make sure you got your brewery rolls going. Because it's going to be a long day. Arnie says, do you think Rusty will go with the Ice Guys, Pollard, Delenda, Creel? Well, that's the thing. You can go with your bankers, inverted commas. The players that it's going to be a very interesting selection in terms of do you go with the safe ones? And this year we generally have been going with the safe options. We've actually been quite happy to experiment and to try go with the new generation. And I think that putting them into pressure situations is also a big thing. I mean, look, they're desperate to win these games. They said that they have to win France. They have to win Ireland. So it's not about those being trial games. But at the same time, if you think that Kane Moody is good enough to play in the World Cup final in 2027, you want to be able to put him into a pressure situation, a cauldron like Stade de France, and say, right, go and win us this game. You want to be able to dump Sasha into this kind of pressure. You want to be able to dump Ethan Hooker into this kind of pressure. Ruben Nokia into this type of pressure. Even my Lewa back into this type of pressure and say, right, let's see, have you really progressed? Vicky Lowe says the game starts at 4:10 on Sunday morning, where I am a bit early for Branders. Well, I mean, not if you just keep going. You could. I mean, set the alarm, start at midnight, have a bit of a pre-jaw nap, and then get on the brandy at midnight, and 4 hours later you can watch like this. But fair. I don't think we'll see Ethan at centre. That's a lot of people are talking about it, but I just don't see how. That'll be a huge throw into the water situation, throw to the wolves type of thing if you go and put him in centre for his first ever game at centre against France. But we're gonna wrap up there, people. Thank you very much for joining me. Tomorrow we're gonna have a bit more of a dive into the team itself. On Thursday morning, we will be doing, or Thursday lunchtime show, we'll be doing our team prediction, the Freedom Sports community prediction. I'll be doing my team prediction in the morning before that. And then we will have team announcement. I think it's about 4 o'clock on Thursday that the team is set to be announced. And then we'll be live on Friday to chat about everything live on Saturday for all the rugby. So please do smash the like on the way out. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. We will have a press conference from, let me not lie to you, I can tell you exactly. We will have a press conference from Lutiago Mailibok, if that gives you any sort of indication. That will be out today. Tomorrow we will have a press conference from Jasper Visa, and Damien Delende will be there on Sunday as well. So look out for that press conference coming up later today. Please do smash the like on the video. Please do subscribe.